Carlos Manzo was executed in Mexico on El Dia de los Muertos on November 1st. Mexico is experiencing riots in association with the killing of this individual. Lucas, help me understand what's going on here.
So Carlos Manzo was adamantly against the drug cartels in Mexico. He was the mayor of Michoacan, and I think what we're seeing here is the tension between the government of Mexico and the cartels coming to a head. And we know that the United States, the Trump administration, has been working against the drug cartels. It's talking about starting a war with the drug cartels. It's we've seen all sorts of rhetoric coming from the Trump administration. Um, but Carlos Manzo was working against the drug cartels in Mexico, and he was assassinated 2 days ago. And I think more important than his assassination is the amount of unrest in Mexico today that has that the Mexican people have been expressing since his assassination. And then whenever we hold that into context again with the United States pivoting their attention from NATO, Ukraine, from Israel and the Middle East.
Well, when
And
you say pivot, what's happening here? Is this why Trump has positioned some of the military in Venezuela? Is it putting it in the right spot to help or to deal with what's going on in Mexico?
so very good question. I've long been dubious of the Trump administration's claims with regards to Venezuela, and yet I've not been dubious of their earnestness and their intent of securing of American security within our borders. What I think has been at hand was that they were having an interior struggle with members of the Pentagon, with members of the Senate, neoconservatives and liberals in Washington who wanted to continue for the United States to continue to maintain our focus in Ukraine and in Israel and some in Taiwan and China. We've known from Trump's statements, from revelations since his first administration, that he thought that the United States military should be focused inside the borders of the United States. And yet, whenever he directed the military to directed the head of the military to remove troops from NATO, from Afghanistan, Iraq, Syria, and elsewhere around the world, they did not listen to his orders. So he's taken a different track. And because of that, I've long suspected that Venezuela was not about actually starting a war with Venezuela, but having the troops close to home. And then whenever we begin to think about the Trump administration's very unpopular and possibly illegal use of ICE to remove foreign nationals, aliens from within the United States, we could see that maybe they had an expectation that there was going to be some sort of conflict brewing with the cartels. And again, I think that's what we're seeing here. Now, let's get into some of the some of what's been happening in Venezuela that we know of too, because I think if we begin to dig into that story, it also opens up some of the calculations that have been made by the Trump administration. Recently, there was an interview that now I'm blanking on his name, Gray Zone, with the Gray Zone had with Jordan Goudreau, and Jordan Goudreau is a former Green Beret who is suing the first Trump administration for complications that came from an attempted coup against Nicolas Maduro back in 2019. And that coup was supposed to place Juan Guaido on the as the president of Venezuela. Have you followed or heard of this at all?
No, not yet. Tell me more.
Okay, I suggest that everybody go to the Gray Zone and listen to the interview that let me think of his name, or um, that the Gray Zone has with Jordan Goudreau, because there are some interesting revelations that are made in it. Now, one is the manner in which Jordan Goudreau lays out the building of the coup against Nicolas Maduro. And he says quite explicitly that this is an extra military organization that has been organized to maintain plausible deniability for the officials in the Pentagon and the White House in the first Trump administration, to maintain that. Uh, Maintain the diplomatic plausible deniability from Donald Trump, from people actually in power. And so and so the chain of command, there's nothing written down on paper. These are only oral orders. And again, whenever we begin to understand that Donald Trump had written an executive order to the Pentagon, and they balked and did not follow that order. um, and we also look into his second administration to say some of the operations that have gone on in Qatar, in Israel, in Russia, with attacks made against Vladimir Putin, and the surprise and um, uh, Donald Trump disavowing having any knowledge of these operations going. Well, if we listen to Jordan Goudreau tell his story, we begin to understand that part of how this works are these isolated cells communicating with various members of government to carry out operations that are not explicitly the policy of the United States government. And what Jordan Goudreau is now alleging against the Trump administration number one, is that somebody leaked to the Venezuelans that this coup was coming. And so what Jordan Goudreau had done was communicated with various Venezuelan generals to make an alignment for to make a common alignment for generals to be ready to turn against Nicolas Maduro, and then had been building up a force of Green Berets and others they had been training in Colombia, and so they were going um, uh, to enter Venezuela at some point, and to create a scene, to uh, to um, to incite a revolution, and have Juan Guaido ready to put in as the president of Venezuela, and to have several generals ready to back him in a junta after this revolution was concocted. They were exposed. Some of them were killed, and some have been arrested and are in prison in Venezuela for 20, 30 years. Jordan Goudreau is still here in the United States, and um, and is in a legal battle with the federal government today. But he claims that somebody in the Trump administration leaked their operation to the Venezuelan government. And I think that is probably true, because if the Trump administration was wanted to pull the United States out of these foreign entanglements, but telling or ordering the CIA, the Pentagon, the State Department, the various organizations to withdraw and to focus on America first wasn't working, well, then the second option that they have is to give away the game, and especially to give away the game for operations for uh, black or covert or secret operations that are happening now. So that sort of begins to expose some of the tensions in the government. The first Trump administration. Fast forward to second Trump administration. Um, on October one, we've had the buildup that Trump is building, the ships, the attacks in the Caribbean that have been going on for the last couple of months. but I've been dubious about uh, how as to what the true intent of the Trump administration is with regards to Venezuela, because we know that Venezuela is more so of a uh, Venezuela has before Nicolas Maduro, the world leader who was most uh, critical of the United States in their wars in Afghanistan and Iraq was Hugo Chavez in Venezuela, and not only that, but also with the United States policies and the way that they were treating and behaving with foreign countries, and they were looking for an alternative path. This gets painted as communism, a failed communist experiments in Venezuela today. But as well, we know too, the Trump administration is pursuing policies of fair trade versus free trade, and so I do not think that the United States, or that Donald Trump and the current Trump administration sees Venezuela as uh, as such a threat to the American way. And so anyway, last or 2 weeks ago, October the 16th, Donald Trump um, made a statement that he had authorized the CIA to engage in operations in Venezuela. And there was a lot of hand wringing and hoopla about that announcement whenever he made it. But again, if the CIA is operating outside, or there are forces that are pushing for war in Venezuela, and Trump is merely using it as a reason to bring troops closer to home, then what better way to hamstring any operations that are going on there than to move them from covert operations to overt operations? And so when this happened, I thought this is an example or a sign that Donald Trump is not truly focused on Venezuela. Are you following me here?
Right. So he's not really positioning the military to move into Venezuela. This is a cover so that we can have our military in position to do a in the clear operation in Mexico. And what this assassination, it was this pulled off by our CIA, or who do we have any idea of who assassinated?
Well,
Uh,
so I have not made those leaps. I've had my assumptions that this was going to. Um, I mean, we also know that the largest security threat and border, or the border that we have in Mexico is the actual focus of the Trump administration. So I was not sure if how the military was to be used, but I have long thought if the Trump administration is actually focused on American security and stopping drugs and human trafficking within the United States, then somehow that focus needs to be moved towards Mexico. And I don't think that uh, I think that Mexico was a boiling pot already, and that merely the United States applying pressure to the operations of the drug cartels within the United States lead to more desperate measures, both here in the United States and in Mexico. And so I don't think that we need to make or that we should be terribly concerned about um, the contrivance of the assassination of Carlos Manzo in Michoacan, but
well,
what
wait,
we
go back for a second. What do you mean the contrivance? I mean, like I don't mean to make light of someone being assassinated, but you're saying this isn't a pretext, that this is not a
I'm
rationale
saying
for.
I'm saying that that if our focus is, did the United States try to um, push the needle towards some sort of assassination of a politician in Mexico? There are assassinations of politicians in Mexico all the time. I think this is the 37th. I saw by one count. I don't know what the time window for that was, but But
because Mexico has been a state which has been at war with cartels internally. They've had various different factions warring for power within Mexico, and when the U.S. visits the resorts and whatever, they're insulated from this. But Mexico has been almost in civil war for a long time with the cartels controlling swaths of territory and what have you.
absolutely, and the United States is sending Mexican citizens back to Mexico, applying, seizing drugs, seizing more drugs, closing down uh, the ability of the cartels to move drugs into the United States is going to make them more desperate in Mexico.
Well,
And
and I've heard too that like there has been suspicion or that it's been discussed that China was facilitating some of this. They were sending precursors for fentanyl down into Mexico, and that this was kind of fomenting all of this unrest that was happening in Mexico as well.
I think that I think those sort of narratives are people who wish to make a bogeyman out of China at any cost. Maybe there are forces and people within China who are motivated by that amount of animus towards the United States, with the memory of the opium wars and the heroin that was trafficked into China 100 years ago. But I think more so China is there are real uses for fentanyl, pharmaceutical uses for fentanyl. China is about supplying the world. They've built their economy on supplying the world with the things that they need. I don't know how much weight we should put into those allegations of Chinese animus. I think that might be a lot of projection on the part of Americans. But what is not projection and what is reality is the control and the power of the drug cartels next door and to next, just to the south of the United States. And so again, if we're going to see a federal administration begin to address American security and try to close down their borders, then a war with the cartels was looming. And if we think about how the United States operates on the coattails of civil unrest in various countries, I think that we should take a look at again, not just the assassination of Mayor Manzo, but the public response and the public outrage in the wake of that, and say, if the United States was looking to start a fight with the cartels, then riding in the wake of that public of that public movement uh, would be a timely move for the United States. And then if we also compound that with the um, uh, the heat that the Trump administration is taking for their tariff wars, and that being brought to a close in Congress, the upcoming midterms as we enter 2026, we're at the end of 2025. I think that it might be the right timing, or the Trump administration and the Pentagon might agree that the timing is right to um, to heat up the war with the drug cartels. So that.
It seems like it flows a little bit counter to the narrative that Trump had during the campaign, that he was not planning on starting any new wars. And I mean, I guess it's also been my understanding that Trump is trying to bring military entanglements home. How does that fit with the narrative that we're now going to be at war with the cartels, boots on the ground in Mexico? Help me connect the dots here, because it just doesn't seem like it quite fits with the way that Trump was positioning his campaign, and also some of the other things that I've come to understand with what has been happening with respect to foreign entanglements ending and bringing those troops home to do things on US soil in these various cities where Trump has said we're going to have a military presence to ensure that the various cities that he has said as exhibiting unrest are brought under control.
Great point. Um, I think the way that Trump and many in government are beginning to look at it is to say it is passé to have wars with other nations. And if we're to live in a multipolar and fair trade war, then we need to cast aside this idea of going to war with other nations.
I
And
see, and this is some of the things that he's been saying. He's at war with, and it has seemed like it's a very weird thing to be at war with. Like it's actually been called out that some of the things Trump has said we're fighting a war on. It seemed incongruous with the way that we would normally have thought about declaring war.
yeah, so we're not going to go to a war with Mexico. Trump is going to figure out how to make an alignment, if not with Claudia Sheinbaum, with the state of Michoacan and other states inside other political bodies inside the federal states of Mexico. The Mexico is actually a federation, just like the United States. So if it can't make common cause with the Sheinbaum government and Mexico as a whole, it's going to find common cause with Sinaloa and Nuevo Laredo and whomever might be reaching out for help. But this is going to be conducted under the auspices of terrorism and clamping down on clandestine alternative governments, the cartels. So just like we saw, Ronald Reagan go to war on drugs. Um, uh, but presidents before him go to war on poverty, whatever. Here we're really going to get down to the brass tacks of not just on a war on terror around in the Middle East, but terror within the United States, terror at our doorstep, and that's how the Trump administration is going to thread this needle. And I think we're also seeing this in a broader understanding of the weapons of war. The if we look at how Russia and Iran have conducted their attacks in Ukraine and in Israel, they have been very targeted, and they have not been about the broad civilian killings. Compare that to Israeli operations in Gaza, United States operations in Yemen. So these sort of hands-off, um, uh, mass bombings, carpet bombings, whatever it may be. I think we are seeing the United States have a realization that is unpopular. That it's much harder to control media narratives of how wars are conducted, and if the United States or if any country is to maintain the moral high ground in the wars that they conduct, then they better be targeted. And so I think that's what we're going to see with the United States as we focus on the cartels.
That it'll be targeted. So do we expect to see the United States start lobbing missiles at cartel bases in a directed way in a similar fashion to how we saw Iran lobbing missiles at Israel? Is that sort of the thesis here? And so is the carrier that's near Venezuela capable of doing that? I'm still trying to get a sense of what do you think the Trump administration is planning on doing here? So they're not going to bring the flotilla of our military close in and then have a landing a la Normandy. We're not going to storm the beaches of Mexico, but rather we're going to shoot missiles from afar, and that allows us to have engagement and kind of declare war on the cartels because they know where they're at and they know how to bomb them.
Okay, so look at the attacks that have been made on the boats off the northern coast of Venezuela in the Caribbean. Um, there's been concern in the United States as to due process and as to the boundaries of international waters, the operations of the United States military without announcing a war. Well, the Trump administration was laying out new rules, and Donald Trump and Pete Hegseth talked about these new rules of engagement. They were um, uh, they were experimenting with what these new rules are going to look like. I think that's what we're going to see in Mexico. And again, I hope, for the reasons of peace in the future and getting along with our neighbors, that there is some sort of cooperation with various governments within the federal states of Mexico. But I think that regardless of whether they have the support or not, the Trump administration is going to engage in those targeted attacks. So if they find, and we can imagine that we have very sophisticated, our government is very good at listening to communications. We actually have very good intelligence, although sometimes we have failures of that intelligence. But I have an idea that the United States military has very good idea of where the power centers, where the production centers of cartels are. And so, rather than sending special forces or small boots on the ground forces, they're going to try to engage in these surgical strikes. Just again, like we saw Iran, focusing on the military bases, the intelligence centers in Tel Aviv. The United States is going to turn around, quid pro quo, do the same thing in Mexico.
Okay, so what should we be watching for? This is the prediction. So we're saying you're asserting that the Venezuelan fleet, the military presence that's over there, is going to turn their attention to Mexico. Well, what do you think we should be watching for in the next few days or weeks to help validate that? Is it when there are missiles that are launched off of that carrier or from the military presence that's there, and then that's sort of the signal that what we're suspecting might happen is actually occurring?
I think first we're going to see Donald Trump begin to open up a dialogue, probably with Claudia Sheinbaum, and a public dialogue. I can only assume that they're already having that private conversation, because that's the way that Donald Trump seems to act with Vladimir Putin, with the Ayatollah in Iran, with Xi Jinping. We see these bombastic statements. I mean, let's even go back to his first administration, to the peace that was forged with North Korea. But how that was led with somewhat bombastic, but we later learned very calculated and public statements with Kim Jong-un. So I think that we'll see Trump begin to redirect America's attention to what's happening in Mexico. I think we will also see that some sort of we've also seen Marco Rubio and Donald Trump disavowing leaks by the Miami paper, and when for those who don't know the history of the Miami Herald, the Miami Herald was against what was often the source of leaks from a very rogue department of the CIA, and the rogue CIA that was implicated, in the assassination of, I say that the rogue CIA office that was implicated in the assassination attempts of Fidel Castro, as well as somehow linked to the assassination of JFK. So, it has a legacy of being a mouthpiece for some of these operations that for some of these forces inside the American government that operate outside of the control of the president and the power center in Washington, D.C. Now, we've seen Donald Trump and Marco Rubio both disavow those leaks to the Miami Herald. I think that we are going to also see a denouement, a rapprochement. I don't know how far it's going to go between the United States and Venezuela. And we also have seen more news begin to focus on the military support that Venezuela is receiving from Russia. There have been, Russian cargo planes dropping off weapons in Venezuela. I don't know what the extent of coordination between Donald Trump and Vladimir Putin are, or the United States and Russia. But again, I think it's much deeper than we are led to understand by their public conversations. And we add on to that. We haven't talked about it here, but there are two new weapons that Russia has recently revealed. Two nuclear powered weapons, not just delivering nuclear strikes, but nuclear powered, that are um, uh, that begin to again tilt.
Is this the missile that the cruise missile that Russia's got, the one that can fly under the radar and is nuclear powered and could strike just about anywhere? That seemed like a pretty significant advancement in weaponry.
Absolutely significant, because what that does is begin to remove, the United States reliance on our bases around the world are all of a sudden moot, because if the Russians can send up missiles that are not just intercontinental but world range missiles, then the United States has lost the card in its hand of its regional and its geographical isolation. And then whenever you also add the Poseidon, uh, I don't know if you saw the Poseidon, but it is a nuclear powered torpedo, and it has the ability to deliver nuclear strikes along the coasts of anywhere in the world. And so, again, we know that Donald Trump understood that the reliance on American primacy, on American coercive power, was a dead end for humanity, and has been looking to overturn that. And so I think that we will see Donald Trump begin to try to curb the American primacy forces in the United States government with regards to um, uh, colonialism, or whatever we want to call it, American empire in South America, and in doing so, again, is going to turn the narrative from fighting with countries, fighting with Venezuela, fighting with Mexico, fighting with Ecuador. It's going to turn that into fighting the terrorist cells, however they may be named. And in this case, is going to be drug cartels, the drug cartels of Mexico. And we are going to become more precise in our military targets.
All right. I'm definitely going to be keeping a close eye on what's happening here. This is a somewhat shocking turn of events. I hadn't anticipated this, but I know you've been keeping your finger a bit more on the pulse, and you've been telling me to keep your eye on Venezuela, and that you didn't think what was happening there was really what was going on. So this seems like a turn of events here on the Day of the Dead on November 1st, and we'll keep an eye on what happens over the next week and few days. Any other final thoughts, or is that wrap for today?
Well, I could be wrong, but I will be very chagrined if the United States goes to war and launches a hot war in Venezuela. So that's all I've got.
All right, and we'll see you next time on FOMO.